Hello and welcome again to another edition of Lost in Science across Australia on the Community Radio Network. This is half an hour where we talk about all things sciencey. My name's Stu, and on this week's show I'm going to have a little chat about the Cassini probe, who's coming to the end of its life up there around Saturn, swinging around. And they've got
Cassini.
A big finale planned for the Cassini probe. They're going to crash it into Saturn.
Whoa.
There's a good reason for that, though.
Oh, there. Yeah, well, they can't just leave it lying around up there.
Yeah,
It'll get get in the way of other probes, possibly.
I'm looking forward to hearing about this because I want to know what it's like. Is it going to be taking measurements on its way into crash landing, or is it going to be taking photos? Like what, or is it just going to be going
whatever
out?
they can squeeze out of it. But I'll talk about what it has been doing as well. So yeah, a bit on that later in the show. Claire, what have you got for us?
Well, after your story last week, Stu, about methods that athletic organisations use to test for being female or letting female participants into events, it got me thinking about sex determination in general. So, you've got the XX and the XY chromosomes in humans.
Yep.
But it's actually much more of a spectrum than that in humans, and then also how sex is determined in other animals. So I'm going to be looking at that.
Interesting. And Chris, what have you got in store?
I am going to be speaking to some special guests. I'm speaking to astrophysicist Alan Duffy and journalist and podcaster Cara Santamaria about their show, which they're calling Beyond the Eye, which is coming to Melbourne on the 17th of November this year.
Is that EYE or?
Yeah,
I?
EYE. It's not like some sort of,
Metaphysical, psychological.
about yourself. I'm assuming it's to do with like forms of astronomy, but they're going to tell me what it's all about. So we'll all find out together what this is all about.
Fantastic. Well, we can't keep an eye on that, but keep an ear out for it anyway. What do you call a robot who's travelled 6.6 billion kilometres?
Tired?
Boy, are his arms tired. No, it's actually, if you said Cassini, you're 100% correct. So the Cassini-Huygens probe was actually launched all the way back in 1997. So last millennium even.
Wow. 97, the year Princess Di died.
Yeah, I don't
amongst
think they're
other
related.
things. You don't... You never know, Stu.
You never know. So
the year that Hanson released Mbop.
These are things we remember from 1997.
that's what you remember from 97. Okay. So it was launched in 1997 and it took 7 years to get to Saturn, which is where it is now. And it flew past Venus and Jupiter on the way. Actually, it didn't just fly past them. It used the gravity of Venus and Jupiter to speed it up so it could get to
Did it
Saturn
do like
quicker.
a slingshot?
Gravity slingshot, yep. Did on Earth as well. So it actually went to Venus and then came back to Earth and then went to Jupiter and then went to Saturn.
Really?
Yeah, so it was a sort of a...
Ping pong ball.
Yeah, it was like pinball.
Pinball.
Yeah.
Pinball.
And so as it flew past Venus and Jupiter, it took some pretty amazing pictures of them and sent them back to us and then went into orbit around Saturn in 2004. And in 2004, also, the Huygens probe separated from the Cassini orbiter and landed on the surface of Titan and sent back the first pictures from the surface of that satellite. And that is still the furthest landing of any Earth-launched spacecraft ever made, which is pretty cool. And then the Cassini stayed in orbit around Saturn and has been sending back pictures and other information to Earth ever since. So they named Cassini after an Italian astronomer who discovered Saturn's rings. And the Cassini orbiter was sent to get a closer look at those rings so we could actually have a better understanding of what they are and also what they look like really close up, because it is really close to the rings. But as well as getting a close look at the rings, Cassini also discovered 7 new moons around Saturn that we hadn't seen before.
Are these like the shepherd moons that keep the rings in check?
Some of them are, and some of them were just kind of hidden. But yeah, they're sort of making the gravity fields that are keeping those rings in place. So these 7 moons were actually unknown. But then when they saw all these 7 moons, they actually looked back over some old photographs from the Voyager 2 mission and realized they already had a photo of one of them called Pallene, and they didn't notice that it was a moon when Voyager sent that photo back. But they sort of went, oh, look, we've already got a picture of this one from an early... Here's one we took earlier.
It's like astronomical CSI.
Yeah, like forensic moon
astronomy.
discoveries. So the primary mission of Cassini was only meant to last 4 years, so it should have finished ages ago.
Wow.
But it's been extended a couple of times, and Cassini has exceeded expectations and continued to function well beyond its expected lifespan.
I don't know. If I finish something 4 years later, I don't think I'd be exceeding expectations.
Yeah, but it was only meant to do.
Oh, okay.
the mission
So it's done
for 4
more
years.
than it was
It's
meant
done
to
more
do.
than it was meant to do.
It wasn't late. It wasn't like tardy.
No. Its 4-year mission was the original lifespan.
And it's up to 20 years now.
Well, 20 years after it launched, but it was meant.
Okay.
Its original mission should have finished in 2008, so it's 9 years later, and it's still doing stuff. Although it did actually lose some of the photos that the Huygens probe sent to it from Titan
Cassini.
because of a software error.
Oh,
So it was actually something wrong with the software. I think got the blue screen of death on its Well,
it would have been
That,
it would have been launched back.
spinning wheel of like,
Well, I'm just thinking, like, if it was launched back in the 90s, then maybe it was launched like with film camera, and it lost on the way to the chemist shop or something like that to get it developed.
which
it was running Windows 3.1.
Yeah, which Windows operating system was it back then?
So the information it has collected has been wide and varied, including measuring the rotation of Saturn itself, which they have done from Earth, but they just wanted to see up close if it was, if it matched up. The way they did that is by measuring radio frequencies that are emitted from Saturn itself, because there's no surface objects that they can see to sort of measure how it's turning. What they did find is that the radio transmissions or the radio emissions that they measured when they've previously done it have actually shifted in the planet somehow. So they're actually coming from a point at a different point on the planet. So the rotation seems to be different, but it's actually that the points they're measuring have moved. So they're coming at a different repeating rate. And also, they even tested Einstein's theory of relativity by testing the effect of the sun's gravity on radio signals between the Earth and Cassini to see if they would be altered by passing close by the sun, which they are, and they are very close to what they would have expected. So it's also taken close-up pictures of a number of Saturn's moons, and it's taken pictures of the surface of Titan, which showed gigantic lakes of liquid methane, which has led some people to speculate that maybe there could be, potentially life on moons like Titan. There's, organic chemicals, basically. Not that methane is evidence of life on Titan, because methane exists in the universe anyway, just as a chemical without life creating it. But the fact that there's organic chemicals means there could be organic chemistry, which means there could be life potentially. And in 2013, Cassini even took a global selfie, so it pointed back at the Earth to get a photograph that included Earth, Mars, Venus, and Saturn in the same photo. And NASA actually asked everyone on Earth to smile for the camera on that day back in 2013. Those wacky
Did you do that,
NASA
Stu?
scientists. I missed the memo, so I didn't know. But Cassini is coming to the end of its operational lifespan, and several options were debated about how to retire the trusty robot, including slinging it off towards Uranus or Uranus, depending how you say it. But they decided
You either
not to.
want urine or anus in that planet name.
You can't really win with that one. But what they have decided to do is to send it into Saturn's atmosphere. So the effect of the gas giant on the robot will be basically to vaporize it in a matter of seconds.
Oh, dear.
So it'll be traveling at 112,000 kilometers an hour.
Wow.
As it passes multiple times through the gap between the rings and the atmosphere of Saturn itself, which they've never actually had a close look at. So they assume there's nothing in that gap. If there is stuff, if there's even little particles of dust, it could actually destroy the probe before it gets into the atmosphere.
So isn't one of the reasons they're doing that because the chance that on some of Saturn's moons there could be life, and you don't want an Earth thing floating around and possibly crashing into a moon and
Contaminating it.
Yeah, contaminating it essentially.
Yeah,
so
basically.
better to destroy it than leave it open for
But
doing damage.
they will obviously collect any data that the probe can
absolutely,
send
as
back
well,
as
yeah.
it's falling into the atmosphere, because they really don't know what's in that atmosphere. They know that there's probably a solid core in there, but they don't even know how big that is. So it'll the measurements it takes as it's falling will actually give them some information. So just, I guess, a little thank you to the Cassini and Huygens probes, who have boldly gone where no one has gone before.
Science, the final frontier. These are the voyages of Lost in Science, our ongoing mission to explain strange new words, to seek out new science and new explanations, to boldly go where no radio has gone before.
So, Stu, your story last week, it was about methods that, the Olympics and other athletic and sports organisations use to test women as to whether they can actually participate in events as women, right?
Yeah. So there has been some, problems with the testing methods that they've had, and they really haven't found something that's a particularly useful way of assessing whether someone can compete as a woman in women's events.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because when people think of, one way to test women, it's like, okay, well, you can do a genetic test. And when you think about males and females in the animal kingdom, you might think about sex chromosomes. So you've got your XX and the XY sex chromosomes. Now, the XX chromosomes being the ones that are typically associated with the female sex and the XY associated with male sex. But like most things in nature, it's much more diverse and complicated than this simple binary sexual determination. And something that I think we should probably be celebrating a little bit more. So let's have a look initially about humans. Let's start with humans. So humans are most often born with 46 chromosomes. So you've got 23 from your mum and 23 from your dad. And in these chromosomes are all the genetic material you'll ever need. Now, one of these pairs is called the sex chromosomes, and these are the X and the Y sex chromosome. So you get an X chromosome from your mum, and you either get an X or a Y chromosome from your dad. So in most cases, your sex will be determined, by your dad. So males are responsible.
It's the genetic material you get from the male parent that determines which sex you end up with.
Yeah, in most cases.
Right.
So males are responsible for genetically determining sex, as each sperm cell will either be carrying an X or a Y.
Right.
But this isn't always the case. We are born with two sex chromosomes. You've got research shows that a few births in every 1,000, you've got some individuals who are born with a single sex chromosome. So this means that instead of having two X chromosomes or an X and a Y, they might just have a single X or a single Y. And also, some people may have more sex chromosomes than two. So you might have people that have 3 X chromosomes, or 1 X and 2 Y, or 2 X and 1 Y. So there's quite a lot of variation. And, just simply having 2 X and an X and a Y doesn't necessarily determine how what your biological sex is going to be.
So how do they manifest physically as the physical characteristics of the people with those extra ones or the fewer ones than.
Yeah, well, it really depends on what chromosomes they have and how it's dependent on, I guess, the hormones and then the pathways that those hormones then interact, and then what sort of what the sexual organs end up. So, yeah, I don't know.
It could be a range of things, basically.
It could be a range of things.
Okay.
Exactly. So there are some males who are born XX because there have been, hang on. Oh, yeah, all right. So some males are born XX as well, but because but they end up as males because part of the sex determining region on the Y chromosome is translocated onto the X chromosome. So you've got a male that is presenting as XX, but part of the Y chromosome is being put onto a X chromosome. And then you've got some females who are born as XY, and that's because you might have some mutations in the Y chromosome. So it's really sort of complicated.
So it's not as simple as just X, Y, and
No.
And there are also people who are not receptive to some hormones as well, I think, who exist. So like they may have the Y chromosome, but their body's not receptive to testosterone, for example. So therefore they don't develop as males.
Yeah. So, yeah, as you say, when it comes to genetic sex, it is much more complicated than we're probably taught at school. Not only are there genetic females who are XX and genetic males who are XY, but rather, yeah, like you say, you've got this range of chromosome complements and you've got different hormone balances and bodily variations that are going to be determining sex. So that's humans. And then the rest of the animal kingdom is even more diverse and interesting when it comes to genetic sex determination. So grasshoppers, cockroaches, and other insects have a similar chromosomal setup to us. I don't know how that makes you feel, but they do.
Oh, I'm fine with that.
You're fine with that?
They can share their chromosomal setup.
So females are XX and produce eggs that contain an X chromosome, but the males, instead of being XY, they have no sex chromosome. Or they have one X chromosome and then no other chromosome. So if you're a female cockroach, then you'll be XX, but if you're a male cockroach, you'll be XO, where the O is the presence,
Is nothing.
is the absence of
Right.
a second chromosome.
So they're really just X.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, but they're XO.
That's how the notation goes.
That's how the notation goes. Yeah. Just to show that there is the absence of something that is present in the female.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another type of sex determination is via the female instead of via the male sperm, like humans. So birds, insects, like butterflies, frogs, and snakes, and some species of fish have this type of sex determination. So in this sex determination, female gametes, or female eggs, I guess, can either contain a Z chromosome or a Y chromosome. And male gametes only contain a Z chromosome. So females are ZY, like the equivalent would be XY in... So for these species, females are ZW and males are ZZ.
Right.
So it's just kind of flipped.
Yeah, it's just sort of flipped. Yeah,
It's funny that insects have a mixture of both.
it is, isn't it? But I guess insects, are just as diverse as vertebrates. And
Well, they're more diverse than vertebrates. There's more insects than anything else.
yeah.
So they have the original version of everything,
It's a
and
very
we're just
pro-insect
copying them.
agenda here.
You're very backbone-centered.
Yeah, I am.
You are backbone-centered.
Vertebrate centric.
Yeah.
I am chordate preferred. Yeah.
And lastly, because it is so cool, you've got environmental sex determination. So turtles and crocodiles in both of these species, sex is determined by the temperature of the eggs at a certain time in incubation. So at a certain time in incubation, when the eggs are incubated above a certain temperature, those eggs will develop into one sex, while the eggs incubated below a certain temperature will develop into the other sex.
I've read about this, and this is actually maybe going to cause some problems if the climate gets warmer, that
Yes.
all of the eggs will turn into one sex and not the other.
Yeah, it's pretty problematic. If you can imagine a turtle going to nest on a beach, and that beach is now 4 degrees hotter than it was 20 years ago, then and you've got a pretty narrow range that of sex determination, then unfortunately you're probably going to get a skewed breakup between the sexes of the turtles.
Yeah, so rather than being 50-50 or whatever it is in turtles, it'll end up
it'll
all
be
being
skewed.
Yeah.
Or there'll be selection pressure to lay their eggs in different spots or something
Yeah,
like that.
or at different times.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's going to take time for those turtles to adapt to that. So really in nature, the genetic sex of individuals comes about through so many different ways. Each are quite fascinating, complicated and hugely diverse.
Across Australia on the Community Radio Network, you're listening to Lost in Science.
Okay, you're listening to Lost in Science. My name is Chris, and on the line today I have Melbourne-based astrophysicist Alan Duffy and US journalist and podcaster Cara Santamaria. This November, Alan and Cara will be presenting a show in Melbourne called Beyond the Eye, and I'm talking to them to find out more about it. Welcome to Lost in Science, Alan and Cara.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, now I guess the obvious question is, what is the show Beyond the Eye all about?
All right, here's my take on it. Using our scientific backgrounds, I'm astrophysics. Cara is a bit more sort of general science and psychology, dare I say it. And perhaps we have two different interpretations. But in my field, seeing really is believing. And yet we know that there are many instances where what you see really isn't what you get. There are weird optical illusions happening thanks to our atmosphere. That's why the stars twinkle. There's optical illusions in the depths of space thanks to warping of space-time itself. All of these things they kind of trick the eye, but they reveal a lot of science in the process. So certainly my take on things was to have a bit of fun and explain how things aren't really as you see them, but if you approach it with a bit more of a scientific mindset, you can actually uncover incredible secrets of the universe.
Absolutely. I mean, all that I would really add to that is it's really what Alan said. He comes from an astrophysics background. My background is in psychology and neuroscience. And so there are many different ways to approach this question of how do we know what we know and how do we know if what we think we know is actually true. And so being able to talk about some of these optical illusion, some of this kind of apophenia, as it were, from both perspectives will help the people who are there at the event get a better understanding of how our minds often play tricks on us.
Now, you threw in the word apophenia there. Can you just explain what that is briefly?
Oh, absolutely. So apophenia, it's an interesting term, and it really has to do with the broad tendency that people have to find patterns in random information. So there are all sorts of cognitive biases that we fall victim to, like the gambler's fallacy. We also tend to see faces in things that aren't actually there. We tend to hear our name even when somebody doesn't say it, or sometimes you'll hear like a phantom phone ringing. And that tendency that we have can be really utilized to our advantage if we are, designing fun optical illusions, but it can also set us back a lot of times when we are trying to come to a reasoned understanding of whether or not what we see is actually true.
Right, now, this is an interesting time to be talking about this, I guess, because there is a lot of feeling of that science is under threat. And I know you're both big promoters of science. How do you think this message of you can't always trust what you see with your own eyes fits into this approach of trusting science, I guess?
You want to take that first, Alan? I got a lot to
sure.
say living here in the United States, so I'll let you take a stab at it.
Yeah, look, I think I'm coming from a much happier place at the moment. Australia is very much more still in favor of evidence-based decision making. People tend to trust expertise and experts still, and that's encouraging. But yeah, we Australia typically follows where America leads, so I think it's important that we keep this kind of conversation alive, where you're getting experts out into the community. We're opening up our science and really having a discussion where possible, just that we don't fall victim to this issue that seems to bedevil us at the moment as a society, more generally in the world, where people just do not trust expertise. And we've sort of devalued years of study where people feel that they, one source they find shared on Facebook is valuable as, an entire journal, a Nature publications or whatever it may be on a specific topic. So look, I go out there to try to remind people in Australia of all the cool things that are actually happening in the universe more broadly, but also specifically with science and STEM, and hope that my little contribution will prevent us going perhaps down where the US has led, which is, I think, a segue where Cara can take over.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an uphill battle here in the United States. And I try to maintain some perspective and remember that, I think the arrow of time really does point to progress. And right now we are in a big hiccup in the United States, but we struggle as a society with understanding what sources are legitimate sources. We have a big problem right now with quote unquote fake news, both in the actual sense and also in the Donald Trump tweet sense. And so it's important for science communicators here in the States and also at large to do our part to, I think, help people cut through the noise and try to make sense of the data that we can actually use to make better evidence-based decitions.
Okay, you mentioned Donald Trump there. Now, speaking of big, round, orange things, I wanted to throw, I guess, an astronomical illusion at you and see what you have to say about it. So the moon looking very large at the horizon, just as an example of the kind of thing that might be sort of beyond the eye, is that a physics thing or is that a psychology thing that the moon looks so big when it's down low?
Oh, that's a physics thing. Alan, you want to take it?
I was totally going to disagree. This is interesting. Yeah, look, this has been known. The moon illusion has been known since at least has been recorded since the ancient Greeks' time. I'm sure it was an issue long before then as well, which is to say the moon, as it rises above the horizon, looks far larger than later on in the night when it's high up in the sky. But you can easily show this is not a physics thing, because you can stick your thumb out, give the horizon a thumbs up. So really, stretch out your arm and look down your arm, and with your thumb up, see how much of your thumb it takes to cover the moon. And it's about the nail, basically, will cover the full moon. And then you try that same experiment later on in the night when it's high up, and your eyes are telling you it is tiny relative to what you saw when it was rising above the horizon. And you look and you see how much of your thumbnail does it take to cover, and it will be the exact same. It has not changed in size. But psychologically speaking, I do this all the time because I still cannot believe it's true, because it feels like it's the biggest object you've ever seen when it's rising, but it's entirely in the eye. So, Cara, what do we think about that?
Well, that's so funny, because when I heard him ask about the moon, I thought that he was asking about why it looks redder at the horizon, not why it looks larger. And that's the first thing I jumped on was that's physics.
That is physics. I'm pretty certain.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
When it comes to the size of the moon, or its apparent size, it really is a good example of how we have adapted to our understanding of the space around us, the world and the universe around us, simply just based on our everyday experience. And when we look up, straight up into the sky, we have a general idea of how far away things are. We understand them to be quite far away. But when we look out at the horizon, we just simply have no reference. And so our brains really do compensate for it. The moon is clearly far away when we look at the zenith or at the horizon, but we force it to look larger because generally speaking, when we look in that direction, things are closer to us. It's so funny how we can make these decisions without even knowing it, and they actually do distort our perception of reality.
And which is, I guess, a simple scientific measure, as simple as sticking your thumb out. That's what you need to look at rather than just trusting what your first impressions are.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's not that simple, right, to debunk as just a quick and dirty test. Sometimes we actually have to develop some visual justifications in order to determine whether or not what we are seeing is really what we're seeing. You know, imagine finding a face in a pattern. We'll look up at the moon. There's a man in the moon, right? But if you look at the moon from a different angle, all of a sudden that completely dissipates. So sometimes you need another frame of reference or another piece of evidence in order to change your perspective a bit.
Brilliant. Okay, well, it sounds like there's a lot of debunking, but as well as a lot of hearty discussion as you two talk about the different perspectives of what science can tell us. Now, where will you be on November 17th?
This is the Athenaeum Theatre in Melbourne.
Brilliant.
So
and
doors open from 6.
Great. And where can people get tickets to this?
You can head to the Think Inc. Website and get it there, or it's on Ticket Tech, as all good shows often are.
Brilliant. Okay, well, we will put a link up on our website as well. I think it's thinkinc.org.au where the ink has got a C in it. Well, look, thank you very much both for joining us, Alan Duffy and Cara Santamaria. And I look forward to your show in November.
Thank you so much.
You're traveling through another dimension. A dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. A journey into a wondrous land whose boundaries are that of imagination. That's the signpost up ahead. Your next stop.
Lost in Science. So that brings us to the end of another show. Now, we just got a listener get in touch with us to inform us that our story on insects recently was maybe not as accurate as we'd like.
Well, he's not saying it's not accurate. I think it's just a different perspective on it. So this is not just any listener, by the way. This is our radio colleague, John from Bigger.
From Edge FM.
Edge
Big
FM.
shout out to Edge FM.
Anyway, so in that, we did a story a few weeks ago where we talked about possibility of declining insect populations around the world, how there are indications in some of the data, as well as anecdotes of people reporting the windshield effect that, you know, back in the day, their windshields used to get covered with bugs when they drove it, and they don't seem to anymore. Well, John reported that his car is indeed still well covered. His windscreen is well covered with bugs whenever he drives. And so maybe in his part of the world, the insects are doing quite well. Well, not the ones that hit his windscreen, at least, anyway.
I'm very happy to hear in Big in New South Wales that the insect populations are doing well. And anybody else in the rest of Australia, we would really love to hear how your insect populations are going. Please write to us at lostinsight@gmail.com and tell us if you get barraged by insects when you're driving home from work late at night.
Or you could...
at dusk, mostly, probably.
Yeah, you could tweet us a picture from inside your car from the windscreen.
Oh, that'd be great.
At Lost in Science 1, which is our Twitter handle.
Or you could, wait till you've stopped driving and do it then. Take a photo of the outside of your car.
Oh, yeah, safe driving, of course.
Yeah, don't take pictures while you're driving.
We also have Facebook.
Yeah, you can also send it through Facebook. We're Lost in Science on 3CR. You can find us on Facebook. But Lost in Science is recorded at the studios of 3CR in Melbourne and broadcast across Australia on the Community Radio Network. But if you don't want to talk to us on the social medias, you can just tune in next week when, once again, the team will get Lost in Science!
Thanks for listening to a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online.